deaf, and I'm just going to give you a little visual description for those who are low vision or blind attending this evening. I'm a white woman with short blonde hair. I have a black shirt on, 3/4 length down my arm. I'm in a room with the door to my left behind me, and I'm pretty much in a corner, and my walls are yellow-ish. I use the pronoun she and her. All right, so moving on. I'm just going to explain a little bit about my background so you know who I am. I'm an actor, and I'm a deaf community consultant for theater as well as film. And I'm a deaf interpreter for theater as well. I'm also an inclusive designer focusing on theater to make theater accessible for deaf and hard of hearing. My master's was at OCAD University in inclusive design. And I focused on live theater and how to make that accessible to deaf or hard of hearing, as well as their family members, whether they're hearing or deaf. I'm also a co-founder of Deaf Spirit Theater, which is a theater group here that I'm involved in. So thank you. So now I just wanted to explain about what we're going to do tonight for our panelists. There are 3 topics that we will be covering. Oh, I forgot to add something. Sorry, I'm just going to go back a little bit. Shakespeare in the Ruff is actually who put on this panel. And we've been working together for 3 years. I became their deaf community consultant 3 years ago. They're a 10-year-old company, and so I joined them about 3 years ago and been working with them ever since. Winthrop Park's outer park is where we perform, and where Shakespeare in the Ruff performs. And I've been involved with a few of their productions, and they perform Shakespeare pieces. So we started with open captioning to make theater accessible and supported by Autism Ontario. So thank you for their support all these years. But they also supported a show that we did this past weekend called As We Live It. So thank you to Autism Ontario for their support in making theater accessible. So thank you for that. And thank you to the panelists for being here, and they've also supported this today. So I think we're ready to go. We have 3 general topics that we will be talking about. The first one, I want each of the panelists to talk a little bit about themselves, their background, who they are, culturally, how they identify, their family. The second topic, we will talk about COVID and the experiences that they have lived in the last few months. Lastly, we will talk about Black Lives Matter and things that are happening in our society with that. 2020 has been quite a year, so basically we're going to review all this that has happened in 2020. So talking about the background, so I'm going to give you a few examples of what we're looking for. So I would like you to talk about, for example, so how do you identify yourself as a deaf person, hard of hearing, late deafened? Secondly, your background, your family background, culturally, what country you might come from. Thirdly, your family, how do you communicate with them? Do you write back and forth? Do you sign to each other? Do you have a set of home signs, lip reading? And fourth, your preferred mode of communication. Do you prefer signing? Do you voice for yourself? Do you sign and speak at the same time? So those are the 4 things you want. I would like you to answer. If you can't, that's fine. But also, I forgot to add, sorry, if you wouldn't mind explaining, also giving a visual description of what you look like and what the room that you're in for those that are low vision and blind in our audience today. Great. So we'll start with Mustafa first. Hello, Mustafa. Hello. Thank you for inviting me to join this panel. So my name is Mustafa, and this is my sign name. I'm from Syria. And I moved here. Immigrated, moved here to Canada 3 years ago. And now I live in Saskatchewan, in Regina, and that's where I am. So I just want to say, what are the other things? What were the other things that I needed to say? Oh, things moved around. Mustafa, yeah, go ahead. What was the other, your family? Yes. How do you communicate with your family? Right, right. Okay, well, my family, we're here in Regina, and most of my family signs, I'm completely deaf, and that's how I identify. I can't read lips, I can't hear, so it's fully signing. So my family, we all communicate using sign language. Not ASL or anything like that. It's only, I guess, like gesturing more so, or home signs type of thing. So, are you driving? This is a phone. I'm making a phone call. So I really love my family, and we all try our best to communicate. What was the other thing again? Your preferred mode of communication. Do you like signing, or do you voice for yourself? What's your preferred mode? Well, for me, I love ASL. I prefer that signing. I do want to learn signs from all over the world. You know, I'm an actor, and I really want to get involved more in the theater world and the deaf theater world. And I want to honor all the different sign languages around the world. It doesn't matter where you're from. So I would like to honor that. And communication is key. And I think that's important to be able to communicate. And also for those who are coming here from other countries, to be able to communicate with them. And it would help me understand them better, and them me. So I think that's great for communication. And I think that's it. Oh, could you give us a visual description of where you are, what you're wearing, what the room looks like that you're in? Okay, sure. So I want to make sure that you see my hands clearly. So I'm not wearing a black shirt. I'm wearing a lighter colored shirt, and we have good lighting here. So it must be good lighting in order to see clearly. And no, don't have patterns on your clothes. If you have patterns, then it could be very visually distracting, and you can't see the signs very clearly. So I'm not wearing any patterns, and if you can imagine trying to struggle to see that. So I'm wearing a solid colored shirt, and a nice button-down dress shirt. So I want to be nice and feel good with our audience here today, and to explain to everybody. And I hope that the interpreters are able to understand me clearly, so which is why I'm just this way, and then they're voicing clearly. I don't know what they're saying, but hopefully that's all clear. You have some facial hair there, right? Yes, I do. Right here. Check it out. And what color is your shirt? It's pink. Purple. Purple, sorry. And where are you sitting? I'm on a yellow couch. I don't know. White and yellow, I guess. I don't know how you call this color. Yeah, you're on a couch though, right? Yes, on a couch. And plain wall, I'd say it's the same kind of color, white-ish yellow. And it looks like it's going on forever, because you don't see what's beyond the little square that I'm in. So, but it goes on forever. Thank you so much, Mustafa, for that. So next person, we have Natasha.
Hello, hello. Hi, my name is Natasha. My last name is Bacchus, and this is a sign name, but I actually prefer to be referred to as Courage. I'm in front of a black wall, and I'm wearing a light beige top. I've got some pearl earrings on, with gold. My hair is kind of a pink color, but it's fading a little bit. It's an older dye, and I have bright nails, almost like a cat. I prefer she, her pronouns. I was born and raised in Toronto, but I'm actually, my family's from Guyana, so I identify as Guyanese. When I was young and growing up and learning ASL, I was happy to interact with friends and use ASL. I did start to speak and sign. My brother doesn't know how to sign, so he gestures. So at home, I mostly speak and sign. At Gallaudet, I was quite taken with Black American Sign Language. That's the use of language that I do enjoy. I've competed in the Deaf Olympics 3 times, and internationally, I've been able to see how international sign is used around the world in my travels with the Deaf Olympics. So I would say I use American Sign Language, Black American Sign Language, International Sign. What else were you asking me to talk about?
Would you mind explaining Black American Sign Language, what
Black
that
American
is?
Sign Language. Sure.
Okay. I think you covered everything. Thank you so much. Oh,
I can add one more thing. I've competed in the Deaf Olympics 3 times as a runner, as a track and field runner. And I'm now involved in performing on the stage in an ASL musical. I've been involved in poetry slams, musical performances, improv theater as well. And I mostly enjoy acting on the stage. That's something I would say I enjoy the most. Thank you.
great. Thank you. Courage. Thank you so much. Now let's go to Thurga. Over to you. Hello, everyone. My name is Thurga, and I use they, them. I've got black hair, black shirt, and there's a logo on the upper left-hand side saying color for change, and it's in yellow and white and orange. Also down the right side of my right arm sleeve, it says, what does it say? Until justice
is real.
is real. Thank you. So I got this. It's a long story when I got this, but anyways, it's a black shirt and I've pulled it up so it's a 3/4 length. She frozen for you as well. Just a sec. Sorry, my internet's a little bit off today. So I'm well lit here. I've got a plain background. Sorry, what were the other questions again? Your family, your culture, how you identify yourself as deaf or hard of hearing, and how you communicate with your family. Well, I have grown up deaf, and I was in an oral class before, but then I eventually switched over to sign language only. The way we communicate is through sign language, and I'm very fortunate that my mom really encouraged everyone to learn sign language since I was young when we moved here, and so I'm very fortunate for that. My background, I'm deaf Tamil, queer, and that's how I identify. I didn't catch that.
From Sri Lanka.
Sri Lankan. I don't use that usually, but and I'm a Canadian. So there are 2 words that I use. And there is a long history with that in terms of colonization, quite a traumatic history. So I will just leave that there. And that's it about me. Thank you so much. So moving on, we have Gary.
Hello, everyone. I'm Gary Malkowski, and this is the sign name. This is my sign name. if I can describe what I look like, I'm actually wearing a pink dress shirt. I'm down in my basement, so I have low ceilings here. I was born and raised in Hamilton, Ontario. I went to the School for the Deaf in Milton. While I was there initially, I was not allowed to sign. So outside of the classroom, out in the hallway, in the playground, we were allowed to sign. There was a very strict program that used spoken language, so it was an oral program. There's about 600 deaf and hard, or there were about 600 deaf and hard of hearing students at the time, and it wasn't the best experience. I've competed twice in the Deaf Olympics for badminton. I was also a goalie for the soccer team as well. I did go to Gallaudet University. I did study social work, counseling. I work at Canadian Hearing Services. I did work at the Canadian Hearing Society at the time. I have been involved in the Ontario Deaf Sports Association, the Ontario Cultural Society for the Deaf. I've been on the national board of all of the sports organizations and cultural organizations for the deaf here in Canada. I'm very supportive of the community, and I fought for deaf rights and sign language rights. And I very much support that movement. At home, when I interact with my family, all of my family is hearing.
Polish.
My father's Polish and my mother is French, and they did not learn how to sign. We would gesture at home, and I'm not able to lip read, but we would gesture and use homemade signs when growing up. Now I'm a father of 6 children, 3 daughters and 3 sons, and they all use sign at home when we interact and communicate. I'm thrilled to say that I have a grandson who's 6 months old at this time.
Thank you so much, Gary. That's great. Wow. Thurga, did you want to add something? Yes, I forgot to add my background, what I'm actually doing lately. So if I could add that, sorry, with technology, it kind of threw me off. So I'm an actor. I've always had that passion to act, and I've always wanted to do that growing up. I went to a mainstream school, and there were hearing kids and deaf kids all mixed together, and we learned together in our classes, and that's basically what it looked like. But the hearing had more opportunity than the deaf students. There were a lot of our program that was cut, and we just didn't have the same opportunity. When I went to high school, I thought it would be better, but we still had some barriers. And then up to grade 12, it was kind of, there was limited opportunities. And just recently, I was involved at GBC in 2 programs.
George Brown College.
Sorry, I missed the name of the program. Introduction to Theater Arts and Theater for Media. And so that was 3 years of my study, and I was quite involved with that. I graduated in 2018. Last year, I was involved in a performance in Edmonton at the Citadel Theater that had a mix of deaf and hearing actors, and it was called The Tempest. And this is our sign for that show. And I had a huge role there, and I was quite involved. And now I'm still heavily involved with theater, deaf interpreting for theater, and all types of projects. We have a group called Deafy's Unique Time that we perform together. So that's basically what I do right now. Great, thank you. Thank you everyone for introducing yourselves. It's great for the community to get to know who you are. So now, are we ready? So we're going to talk about COVID. 2020 has been quite a year. Wow, everyone. Okay, sorry. It's jumping around. Technology keeps moving all the windows around. All right. So when COVID happened, it really had a huge impact on the whole world. And I would say that it affected people more who had disabilities, the elderly, people who were impoverished or below, or who are low income. You know, and I feel it's important for us to talk about our experience during this time of COVID, especially for the deaf folks here. So I just wanted to my first question is to everyone. So this has to deal with access. So when COVID happened, do you feel that as a deaf community that we received the information adequately, that we had access to everything that was happening on the news with captions, ASL interpreting, or do you feel that it wasn't sufficient? What is your opinion on that? So just yes, courage.
I can, yes, if I can. That's a good question. It does make me think. Please give me a moment. Okay. So your question does make me think. 2019, I was involved in Black Drum theater production. It was at Can Stage and it was very accessible. People were able to access it. In 2020, February 2020, my colleague Gatry and I wrote a show called The Two Natashas. It was actually performed at the Sounds Off Festival in Edmonton. And it's a memory that I treasure so very much, the time that we spent there. In March was when COVID hit us, and I didn't really understand what was going on. They were telling us about the masks, and it was very dangerous, and the number of people that could possibly die. I got very nervous and I was scared. And for about a month, my family every day kept in touch to make sure everything was okay. You would go out and no one was around anywhere. I was concerned about my theatrical contracts. We were supposed to be traveling, Gatry and I, with our show, The Two Natashas, and our entire tour got canceled. So I was very concerned about what would happen with work and isolation. I don't like to isolate. I'm not the type of person who would like to stay home. I like to get out and about and stay busy. And staying home for too long makes me feel like I can't. I feel stir crazy. And after having to do that every day, it really did hit me. It was strange because a new path kind of formed itself. Some of the arts organizations that I had worked with last year remembered my name. And then in February, all of this stuff came up with Zoom. I'm not great with technology. I didn't have my light set up. I didn't have a background, but I now have everything put up into set up and in place. I got an Ethernet cable to make sure that my internet connection wouldn't freeze up. I made sure that I had all of the equipment and everything that I needed so that I would be able to set up and do my work on Zoom. And this is everything that happened. Everything that started off initially as a negative thing for me ended up being positive because everything kind of transitioned onto Zoom and online. And it's ended up being me spending many, many hours on Zoom. And I have to sit down all day in front of the camera and it hurts my back. I've competed in the Deaf Olympics, so I'm a very active person. I'm an athlete. So there are a number of things. For example, the background has to be a certain shade because I'm dark skinned. And if the light is not the right color, then I get washed out or I'm too dark. And so when you think about colorism and my skin being too dark and what people might say about that and how I feel about that, really COVID has hit me in a strange way and it's been a strange journey. I'm happy that things can continue to run and that I've been able to benefit and with some of the things transitioning online. Thank you.
Thank you. Mustafa and then Thurga. Okay, great. Thank you for that question. Can you see me okay? Great. Well, the same thing as what Courage and Natasha was saying. It was quite awful, the isolation. So I have a story about what happened. You know, in 2019, you know, when I heard about this sickness that was happening in China, no offense to China, but this is where it started, and I didn't really know what this COVID-19 meant. And I saw it, but I didn't know what it meant. I thought it had maybe something to do with war. No, COVID-19 is a sickness that has spread. So I thought, I just heard, within the deaf community, we're all trying to inform each other. Oh, it's about this, it's about that. And so we're listening to that. And, I'd look over and read this COVID-19. It was really strange. I didn't fully understand it. So I just basically ignored it. You know, I just focused month by month. And then as time went on, you know, uh, started making plans, and I thought, perfect time for studying, to be responsible, to find a job, thinking about what I'm going to do to make some money, and all these types of plans that I was making. Trying to be responsible, people, your students, and then you learn how to basically function in life. And I know, the government and the president is all these things happening. But anyways, the government announced, now everything is just going to close down. And it was just a shocker. Everything. Businesses, schools closed down, restaurants closed down, and everything. And you had to stay home. You had to stay home and isolate. I didn't know what to do. How was I going to handle this? But I saw other people, other students, that they don't have computers, they don't have phones. I'm trying to think, what are they doing? What if someone wants to learn ASL, or, a person wants to communicate, and how, my teacher, John, well, he's there and he teaches, and I was thinking about him and what he was going to do. He has to teach to get people to be active and do things. And I wanted to learn. And then COVID hit, and then that isolation, and I felt really stuck. I didn't know what to do. I would reach out to my parents and say, I want to go to school, and they said, no, you cannot go, you have to stay home. And so I felt stuck. I had to stay home and basically twiddle my thumbs and figure out, what do I do, and how do I communicate, how do I communicate what I need? This is what I normally do at school. And luckily I had my cell phone, and I could text and use Facebook, and there's other things like Zoom. I don't know if we have agreed upon a sign on Zoom, but there we go. We have Zoom. And I had no idea about all these technologies, but we had that. And so, you could have, you can meet online for school, and I didn't know English very well. So I had it explained to me that you could do this and connect. And, they told the other students and how to give them some advice. And I don't really know what everyone was doing. So, because not everyone can get in touch. So those other kids that you're talking about, they didn't have technology. No, they didn't, and, because their parents, maybe they couldn't afford it. Everyone has a different situation. They're not working. When you're newly moved here, a newcomer to Canada, it can be an issue, and it's a struggle at the beginning. So all those other students are newcomers to Canada as well. So they just arrived. Yes, that's correct. So there is that. And so, you know, school aside, and trying to focus on so for me, I focused on dancing, music and signing, trying to figure out how to express ourselves visually and move to the music. Something to enjoy ASL and keep it with the music. And I didn't want to lose that, because we were working on that at school. And so trying to get to all the kids to be still involved with that. So 2019 was great. It was going along great. In 2020, it felt like we lost so much, that communication and what to do. And it was quite nerve wracking to think about. It was awful. I was like trying to uh, look at my parents and trying to figure out what to do and trying to get that explanation. And there were no interpreters sometimes for the information. Now in Canada, we do have access to that. But before that, there weren't any at the beginning. And I had no idea what was happening. I didn't know. And I would, ask my family, and they would try to explain it. But most of the time, like I said, we gesture or we lip read, and so I didn't understand. And that's an issue as well. So trying to just figure out. So that was a problem. Now things are starting to move along slowly, with COVID, but I'm just thankful to God that I'm here now and able to get through that. Well, thank you, Mustafa. That's a lot of information. And I know that there are a lot of students that are newcomers and they're just learning ASL, just learning English, and then COVID. I can't even imagine what they're going through. That's right. So what to do if they don't have access to technology, that's really tough. Yes. But thank you for that. Thurga, did you want to add something to that? Yes. Well, really, what do I say? What do I say? The COVID, related to access, it was really hard. I feel that, it's kind of the same thing. Trying to think when I'm trying to think of my theater and access. Access is always the last thought, an afterthought. This happens not just now with COVID, but with other things in theater and school. It's like, oh right, it's just like saying, oh, last minute, right? We didn't think about the access, and we have to rebudget for this, and we have to think about hiring interpreters, and this is the same old thing over and over again. So, and I understand that the world has gone through a lot. There are a lot of issues. People have lost their jobs, lost their income, and it's really tough for everyone. But I think, you know, I had a roommate and, I had families not close by, but keeping in touch and contact. Luckily, I had a phone, so I was able to keep in contact with those that I wasn't living with, but chatting. And my luckily my roommate did sign or does sign, and we were able to communicate with each other, so that was okay. But when I think of COVID and looking around, it's so unclear. Not having access with the proper interpreters. I know that they had to act quickly and get everything going, and like, this is a serious situation, but I kind of feel that that the hype of it all, I think a lot of it's lost with everything. I think Mustafa and I have different backgrounds, but we still have the same access barriers. you know I grew up in Canada and being able to sign and having interpreters, but still the frustration, you see still that so many families here that are just recently immigrated, they don't have access to technology. The language is different, that it's not their first language, so they don't have access to information. There's just, you know, one thing that happened, you have to go to work and you have to stay distance from each other. But when it's related to COVID as the deaf community, they don't understand, how to work around COVID. You have hearing people where you have certain words and it's not clear, but to explain it to a deaf person, it's just not. There's the information that's missing, and we don't have access to that. I try my best to understand what they're trying to say. So really, access is lacking, and it's always been like that. But now it's definitely gotten worse. And it's not just in Canada; it's in the U.S. as well. They do have, they've had advocacy. They have the ADA, the Americans for Disabilities Act, and we have similar type of legislation here. But it's still the level of acknowledgement for access. It's always an afterthought. It's never thought of as that to gain access to information at the beginning. It's something that people realize after. They think that that idea with the 14 days of the isolation, that I like thinking that you'll be fine after that. The kind of information that is needed to be shared in terms of what you need to do with COVID, the dangers, is not completely understood. Like, hearing folks understand it, but we need to have that interpreted and to make sure that that information is clear for the deaf community. And so sometimes it's not explained clear enough. And so you have to have it re-explained again, and explain it in a way that is more natural to a deaf person in their first language. And so, it's starting to we started advocating to make sure that we had access, and and explaining how to be safe for COVID. But I mean, it's October now. But when we think about the amount of time since it started, from when COVID started and the lockdowns until now, and the amount of information that was missing at the beginning and finally being able to have access to that. So again, I mean, this brings my point back to access, how it's never thought of right away, and how deaf folks need to have access to that information. You need to hire the proper interpreters and deaf interpreters. Anyone with disabilities should have access to that. And you should have representation. Like, deaf interpreters are representative of the language that we use, to have representation and to support that. Learning that way, then thinking about it after and having support for each other. So, I mean, it doesn't work like that. If access is going to keep being like an afterthought, it just won't work. We need to have that access from the beginning. Thank you so much, Thurga, for that. And I think the community needs to realize, and they need to know, that what deaf or hard of hearing people need in order to have that access, always hire a deaf or hard of hearing person to have an authentic experience, and have them explain and consult about what the needs are, what their access needs are, because it could be different. So hire someone from the community. Don't ask a hearing person. They don't have the experience that we have growing up deaf or hard of hearing. So just putting that out there to the community. Gary, is there anything that you wanted to add?
Yes. The first month back in January, I didn't have employment at the time, so I started looking for something. COVID started in China, and I had heard about this COVID thing, and I thought it was similar to SARS. You remember the situation with SARS? I thought it was nothing. It was only for a couple of weeks. I thought it would be something similar to that. I thought it was an illness, but I didn't think it was anything big. I thought there were the protections. I thought it was maybe a temporary situation, maybe lasting for a couple of weeks. And the information kept changing. There was always different information. Things weren't clear. When they first started their medical announcements and the updates and the COVID updates, there was a lot of advocacy work that had to be done because there were no interpreters initially. And if you notice, across Canada, there were interpreters on screen, and they actually started adding deaf interpreters as well, those deaf interpreters having more knowledge. And so we started seeing interpreters every day on the daily updates and briefings. But again, the information itself kept changing. The COVID information wasn't consistent. It kept changing, and oftentimes wasn't clear. And so the thing that I thought was nothing, I soon realized it was a life-threatening illness. We had to socially distance. We couldn't be near anyone. Masking was mandatory and necessary. And then it hit me. I usually go to soccer on Sundays as part of my exercise, and I couldn't go any longer. I would go for walks. All the stores would be closed. I got a job and started working from home, and we would all start fighting over my computer. What ended up happening was my internet connection wasn't stable, and that was definitely frustrating. So now we have to communicate through using these different platforms online, trying to use my phone to communicate, sitting in front of a screen all day, it's like trying to watch TV all day. I think the optometry business, the eyeglasses business, is going to do well with the number of people that have to sit in front of a screen and the damage to your eyes. All of the ways to interact and communicate has completely changed, and it's things that I'm not used to in my life. The virus, I mean, it's a worldwide pandemic. I had no idea that this was coming, and all of the internet connections and the ways that you communicate and the way that you get information now has to be online, and you have to socially distance and isolate and quarantine, and it's really changed the way that we live, the way that we eat, going grocery shopping, and then having to clean what you brought home. If you come through the door, if you're touching the doorknob, making sure that you're wiping down surfaces, making sure that you're changing your clothes if you go out. It's really impacted me, and it's impacted the deaf community. There is not the same communication. It's hard to meet up with people. For my kids, my son has lost his job. my one son lives in Germany, can't come visit. It's really hit my family as well. I think we need to make sure that we have more access to communication, make sure that we have uh, different sources of media where there's deaf representation so we can see our stories. Black Lives Matter is such an important issue. I know that the government in some ways has rejected it, but the Black community has fought for years, and you can see the rallies. You can see what's happening in the U.S., which is crazy, and here in Canada, we have COVID going on. At the same time, we had the Black Lives Matter movement. As a result, I think with everything happening, definitely deaf people have not been made the priority. And when I look at what's happening in the community, everyone's calling everybody out. There's been a lot of negative things happening online because of emotions are running high, frustrations, people don't know what to do, all the discussions about privilege, what's happening for Black people, what's happening for Indigenous people. It's a heavy discussion, what's happening in the LGBTQ community. We need to, everybody has those frustrations. People are looking to communicate, people are looking for support. Now in COVID times, now with Black Lives Matter, I think there's advocacy happening, but I think again, deaf people are being ignored and pushed to the wayside. I know communication is a very important issue, and I'm not used to sitting down all day at my computer screen to do it. Sitting in front of a TV all day, it's the same idea. I can't stand it. I want to get out and communicate and interact with people and exercise and do all of those things I would normally do. And I can't. So it's been quite the experience. And I've never experienced anything like this. I thought that it would be similar to what SARS was like, maybe a 2 or 3 week period. It's been almost a year. It's been frustrating not necessarily having access to information. So what's happening next, I think, is going to be challenging. At the same time, we're learning about technology. We're learning about the use of the computers for online creative work. There's no more changing the channel.
Social distancing, yeah.
There's no more hugs. There's no more hugging. I see more and more masks every day. It's become our new normal. It's the new behavior that we have to exhibit moving forward. No more hugging, all that socially distancing.
So just to put that out there, how do you feel about masks? The mask wearing and social distancing. Natasha.
Yes. Those masks, I'm starting to get fed up with them. I can't breathe. I like to have the fresh air when I'm out, but wearing the mask is odd. Going into a space and having to wear a mask, sometimes I forget it. I don't necessarily always bring it. But it's a new responsibility that you need to have a mask with you and wear it. But it's really tough for me. It's really tough breathing with my mask on. My biggest concern is traveling to another country. I can't imagine having to wear a mask while flying. I think that would increase my anxiety because I'm always worried about my breathing and I feel like I'm choking. And so wearing a mask, it's odd, it's new that you have to, and I wear masks that kind of have a kind of style or maybe has a political message like Black Lives Matter, but I still don't like wearing a mask. I'll be honest, I don't. I definitely don't.
What kind of masks do you have? Like, how do you communicate with hearing folks? Do you have the see-through ones?
Okay, so the masks, if I'm going anywhere, if I'm going grocery shopping, it's a barrier for communication. I try to let people know that I'm deaf and nobody wants to try and speak to me. Gary, what you were saying about the government and prioritizing deaf people, never putting us at the bottom of the heap and barriers to access, definitely that's the case.
Thurga, Well, having a mask, it's a new thing, but it's really hot. You get sweaty, and it's hard to when you're breathing your own air in and out. It just gets really hot and humid in there. So it just feels that you're kind of trapped. Um, but I know now that they have different kinds and different masks. But you know, remember before with disabilities, people with disabilities, and trying to stay healthy, they have to wear the masks. They would make their own masks, and in Asia they had masks, and they because of the dust and pollution, and they would wear masks all the time. So I think here it's just such a new thing. We never had to be required to wear masks, and it's fine. But does it actually help? Does it actually stop the disease from spreading? I see the ones with the see-through windows, but it makes it so hot. The condensation that builds up in there, it's really hot in there, and it's not great. And then there's like the face shields, where you can see the facial expression, but again, they still need to make some improvements on the design. I mean, there's so many different kinds of masks, and they all have their kinds of challenges. But I mean, I know that it's important to wear because it's to keep not just me but others safe. And it's really hard, and I understand that, but it's challenging, and I want to take it off, and I just if I have to sneeze or have to talk, and then my hands and signing all over my face. And deaf culture, we touch our face. They're saying don't touch your face, but it's hard not to, and we're signing, and then you can't breathe, and then you just you know it's like you're trying to like mime it, I think is what you said. Oh, it's like a meme. Sorry. Like you see those memes out there when people are trying to, sign, and then you're in your car, you just like rip the mask off and be like, oh, I can breathe. Oh, that was so bad. It's like going through a really bad like surgery or something, and thinking when you're signing and your face is covered, and it's just like you need to let that go. You need to have that connection from your facial expression to your signing to your body movements and everything. It's just really hard. But the other thing, in terms of mass, but you have to, because we're not moving around as much, and you see people in masks, you can't see what their face is doing, and so you have to try to move your body more to make up for the fact that you can't see your facial expression. And so I just feel disconnected. you know are you feeling anxious about people around you? And like, I live in a pretty well off area, and like people, I don't go out a lot. I see people going around, they have their masks, and they're thinking, oh, it's no big deal. Maybe not. That's a white privilege thing, I think, and they just don't realize they don't care. They don't have their masks on, and they just walk around. But I just feel so conflicted about you know our safety versus accessibility, and then what some people think it's nothing, and they don't feel that they have to wear it. So in terms of masks, I think, it's important that we stay safe. But I think also that learning, that exposure to learning how to wear masks. I see people with them half off their face, below their nose. They don't understand the point of it. And I mean, I guess the importance of access and visual. And so I get that you have to cover your face, but there are benefits to it. And it's simple just to have that communication, and then you can understand it. And so, I mean, a lot of the times I don't really understand what they're saying, and I'm just like, okay, fine, and I just let it go. But I mean, the communication's not clear, but we need access, and I guess that's the point. But that's a perfect example, like hearing folks who have the mask. There's another way that you can try to communicate with people. If you're speaking, I'll be like, no, sorry, I can't hear you, but they keep talking and I don't understand. I just told you that I was deaf, that I don't understand what you're saying. So what other ways would you suggest to folks to help communicate with you better? Thurga? You can use your phone to text back and forth. I know that in terms of distancing, that could be deemed as dangerous because you got to pass the phone back and forth. But if you can, show the other person, or, like send it over, not texting, but, like in your notes, there's those apps in your phone that you can have notes and then show it and then communicate that way. So in a written digitally written form. Body gestures, gesturing to one another. I know that a lot of hearing folks, they get all freaked out when you when you're gesturing someone with a mask and they're trying to do all these movements, and it can be a little bit nerve-wracking, but just to relax and to know that we're just trying to survive and communicate, and just try to go with the flow. I know a lot of hearing folks just get kind of shocked and like a deer in headlights. They don't know what to do. But if we think about access and the importance of access, and learning how to be accessible to everybody. Some hearing people, they don't like the noise. They think they complain about this and that. And, it's the same thing. If they learn how to sign, they can communicate better and forget about all that other things, and communicate with everybody. There's a benefit for all. And other disabilities as well. Those that can hear still, but they still want to express themselves in sign language. So there are other uses for sign language. There's a silent way of gesturing and signing, and when you're thinking of on set, on a movie set or something, people are gesturing. It's like, okay, you can't speak right before it starts filming, you're gesturing. So people use these techniques to communicate, whether they're with deaf folks or not. And we think about back in history, like many, many years ago, the idea of gesturing and communicating through gestures is so natural for us. And that's how people communicated, even thousands and thousands of years ago. So it's such a natural language, and it's our language. And so, it's a language. It's the way that we communicate, we connect with one another and express ourselves and get that connection. And, without language, how are you able to express what you're feeling and what you want to say? I mean, I think a lot of think people in the hearing world think that it's not it, but it's just it has been around for so many years, and it's such a natural thing for humans to communicate through gesture and sign. Gary, did you want to add something to that?
Yes, just to let you know, there's no such thing as perfect access. There isn't. For example, when you're watching television, you could have interpreter on the screen, you could have a deaf interpreter on the screen. What sometimes happens is the camera suddenly shifts away from the interpreter and you don't see them anymore. It doesn't necessarily remain on the interpreter, doesn't necessarily remain on access. So it's not perfect. So when it comes to masks, wearing masks, I know that the see-through masks that they've talked about sometimes will fog up, which can be annoying. Sometimes there's a glare and there's a reflection off of whatever ever that mask as well. I know that people are scared and they want to maintain the social distance if you try to approach them to communicate by using your device, by using your phone or whatever. They kind of make that gesture like, back off, don't you come near me, don't you come too close.
And you're stuck.
And you can see they physically back away. If you go into a grocery store and you try to communicate with a staff person, they put up their hands and say, don't you get close. And you need to, when you approach the lineup to check out, you have to have that distance of however many feet. So trying to communicate information, to be clear, nothing's perfect. There is no clear,
agree.
Clear, perfect access. It's always work.
Right. And everyone has to work on access, always.
Nothing improves. The government doesn't make it a priority unless you advocate. The government, they prioritize safety over access. Safety is the priority. Access is a lesser priority, much less.
But wouldn't you say that safety, if that's first, but when you think of safety, but we need access to become safe. So that seems a little backwards. So if we had access to the information, then we would be safe. So how does that affect our community?
The information is continually changing as well. Don't forget, the information isn't consistent. And then it's a new language. This is a new language for interpreters. And then the concepts are changing and the language is changing. It's ever evolving. And then people worry. They can't calm down. They stay worried. You read the newspaper every day, and the news in the newspaper is changing constantly. You can do this, now you can't do that. I'm telling you, Stop pretending that access has improved here and that it's perfect. We're sharing real life experiences, a real life discussion. These are lived experiences.
Yeah, in the deaf community, right?
There are no buts. There's no buts. There's no ifs. I'm telling you that the world is not perfect and access is imperfect. The deaf community is healthy, but they're angry and they need to listen and they need to do something about access. The government continues. We talk about the economy, but we're pretending that the world is trying and we're trying to improve. And, you know, we're going to look at the budget and we're facing, yes, Black Lives Matter. That's important. Indigenous lives are important. As communities, we can work together because we're all frustrated. We can talk about it. We can discuss it. And we can look at people living in poverty. Those deaf people living in poverty don't have very basic technology. What are they going to do if they're home isolated and can't communicate?
Exactly.
It's the continued oppression. And don't forget, we as deaf people, our lives aren't easy. You can see what's happening with the discussion. I agree with everything that's being said. It's very, very important. But we need to learn through lived experience how best to live. And that's part of our lives. That's part of the learning. We must be prepared for people to get sick, prepared for people to die. That's a part of life. And yes, safety, health and safety is a priority. Wear your mask, socially distance, communicate. All of it's very, very important. Stay healthy, exercise, all of that.
Keep in touch with your family and your friends. You have to think about your mental health as well. Wow, time has gone really quickly. But so it's such a complicated topic with COVID, but we can go on for hours and hours talking about this. But I don't want to run out of time. It's 7:06 right now, and we only have till 7:30. Your comments are wonderful though, and it's really powerful messages that you're all sharing. I just want to add one thing Thurga saying, in terms of COVID, you know, who suffers the most are the deafblind, actually, because they're used to having that physical touching in terms to be able to communicate with one another. And COVID has had a huge impact on the deafblind community, and other folks with disabilities. You know, if they have support workers and they have now all of a sudden there's people support workers can't come to their home because they have to stay distance, and so it's had a huge impact on those folks. Liz is saying thank you so much, and I just wanted to touch on the next topic before we run out of time. Maybe a couple people can comment on this,
About Black Lives Matter.
about Black Lives Matter. So, I mean, so much has happened. And it's not just this year, but for many, many years. But this year, we all see the protests that are happening, the murders that are happening with the cops. And so it's really shaken the world. And I just want to know more about the IBPOC deaf community, those who are members in that community, and your experience, and how you experience racism in your own deaf community and what that looks like. Because your experience is important. We need to know. We need to know in terms of what it's like. Mustafa, did you want to say something? Yeah, you know, we need to learn how to live together. You know, it's in my community. You know, the youth and the elderly. But there are some, great people who work out there, and they're really working hard to develop and support the community. And there are other ones that aren't so much. But those who aren't so much are supportive. They kind of look down on people. They say, "Oh, you can't. Too bad. You can't learn ASL. You don't have enough. It's too late. It's too late for you." And they ignore us, and they just go on with their lives and doing what they do, and you know, and keep going that way. And they don't think anything of it. But they should be helping us. the youth and how we can learn how, ASL and learn better sign language, and it just takes one person to do that. There's an old man who's taught me, and I just feel so good, but there's others that aren't so encouraging, and we need that. We thank you for sharing that language. And a lot of people, like, do you know this, or do you know what we're doing? That's like, oh well, I'm deaf. Like, how do I communicate with those hearing folks? They don't know. And time is running out. Where the people are ended up being isolated, like those kids that are in school and they play with each other, but then COVID hit again. That's the other issue, and they all have to stay home. And so where are they able to learn the language? The community has fallen apart. We need to lift it up again, and we need to be there for each other and make sure, like what Gary was saying, like we need to have information shared and fight for it and not give up, and fight for that information. The need is there, and share with everybody, and just think that, you know thinking that we're just like down at the bottom, that we're not worth thinking about. No, we need to make sure that we value the deaf folks, the hard of hearing folks, and the hearing, the whole community, and everyone. And communication is a key. And you need that communication to keep it going, and you don't want to lose that. So, it's really, it means a lot to me. Liz is saying, thank you, Mustafa. Did anyone else have a comment to make in terms of the IBPOC deaf experience in our own deaf community? Natasha.
Black Lives Matter. That hit me hard. Uh, I'm 42. I've taken some time to self-reflect. When a friend posted on Instagram what had happened to George Floyd, I looked at it and I read about what happened. I watched the video and I was disgusted. It was like a trigger for me. Now at 42, I realized that I've grown up in a colonized world, a white supremacy world, a white supremacist system, and it disgusts me when we think about colonization by the British, what was done to indigenous people, what was done to Black people, and how it continues. The white supremacy system continues. And the only reason is because we're different, indigenous people are different, our culture is different, our skin color is different, the way we speak may be different. I don't feel safe in this system. I know that there's people look down on me. There's colorism because of the color of my skin. There's racism. There's intersectionality because I have a number of intersections. Gary was talking about access and the barriers. They're barriers to me, and the barriers are oftentimes worse for me. Black Lives Matter is focusing on hearing Black individuals, but if you think about deaf Black individuals, we're at an even lower stratification when it comes to race relations, and it's hard for me, and I feel frustrated. But I have to survive. I have to survive through all the things that happen and survive the barriers. And you have to enjoy your life. You can't just survive, you have to enjoy your life. And so it's hard for me. And when I think about the self-reflection, Black Lives Matter, enjoying your life, surviving, I've been an activist, but there isn't enough. I'm proud. I'm a proud deaf Black woman, but I'm always thinking about survival. And anti-Black racism continues to this day. It hasn't ended. I think Black Lives Matter has disrupted the system of white supremacy. I'm wondering if people are willing to change their privilege for us. Is it going to be just action? Is it going to be action or just talk? I think it continues, but Black Lives Matter Indigenous people have fought for years. We fight together. There's that mutual respect and peace in our communities. It's not our job. It's not our job to change when you see what's been happening for years and that it continues. It's what's worse is to sit back and to do nothing. It's really difficult. It's hard to live within a white supremacy system. And when I think about having access and Black Lives Matter and the number of intersections for me, it sometimes feels overwhelming, but I'm very lucky. My brother has always been so supportive of me. He's very much been supportive of each other. And we have to stay strong. And it's important to remember that you have to live and enjoy your life. Take that time to enjoy, not just think about being in survival mode and thinking about COVID, Black Lives Matter, access, and all of the stressors that you experience in your life. Think about your life and the enjoyment. I know that it's hard, but we need to have both. And we're kind of right in the middle. I don't think racism, anti-Black racism is ending tomorrow, next year, 40 years. I think that would be the way. I think it's up to people who have, white people who have that privilege. Are you ready to change that privilege? Are you ready to change and disrupt that system? That system has to be changed for our safety, for us to be able to fully be appreciative of our lives. If you're living in stress, if you're living in survival, it's heavy and it's difficult.
Thank you, Natasha. I really appreciate your comment. Thank you so much. Thurga, did you want to add something? Yes. Black Lives Matter. That is such a huge topic, and how it affects Indigenous folks as well. And people from other countries that are living here. And it's something that everyone has experienced with white colonization and the effects that it has on the Indigenous people of those lands. I experienced a situation that had a huge impact, and it was so hard for me. And I just, uh, I felt like I was tied. I was imprisoned and couldn't move. The whole world, you had COVID, and then the lack of communication, technology having its limitations, and just the effect. The situation is just so messed up, thinking of Black queer community and how much worse it is for them and what we're all going through. And we want to, be in a safe space. That's all we want. We want to be in a safe space and have that for the future. And I just feel like right now the community is still, I don't know, the hearing world, the deaf world, it's the same. People are just feeling that the people with privilege, they have their privilege out there. You have deaf folks that can sign, and from deaf families they have privilege. And when you think of other families that don't have that, and how they're just at such a disadvantage. And now thinking, I have those same experiences, and I feel that those who are disadvantaged are even more so, and it's getting worse. But, we all just want to have that safe space, but it feels like there's a dark cloud hanging over us. And I feel like, who's there to be supportive of everyone? And it just feels like the whole world is just, it's they're losing the focus on what's important. I had my roommate and my family, and so I was lucky that I had that. But so many people don't have that support system. And then Black Lives Matter, and just trying to understand what that's all about. And there's racism, but there's also people who are saying, but I'm deaf too. Like I feel oppression as well. But no, but in the face of it, like you can come across, and you're not Black, and you don't have that same experience. You don't walk out of the door and have that. So you already have privilege, even if you're deaf. But if you're white, then you have that privilege. But as a person, I did have privilege growing up, but I still experienced oppression in a different way. And like I didn't grow up in a deaf family, and so I didn't have that privilege. But I was still happy. I was able to communicate. I was lucky. But then I feel that those that have that other privilege, I just feel that so many people in the community are lacking, and they lack that connection, and thinking, I don't understand why you're behaving that way. The community here, and with COVID and how it's hit everyone. And it's just, yeah, so much. And I think too, in the deaf community, there are many imbalances. There's so many layers, like the deaf community, not everyone's white. There are diversity there. There's deaf. There's people who've lost hearing in one ear. Some people speak. Some people sign. Some people sign and speak. Some people have come from deaf families. Some people don't, and some people are not deaf enough. Some people, deem them not as worthy. But, it's so complicated in our community. And Gary, did you want to say something about that?
So I'm going to be open and honest with all of you. Back in the 80s, the police would shoot Black individuals. I supported the Black community to stop the abuse of the police back from the 80s. Back in the 80s, I was involved in that activism. I had two experiences in my life where the police pointed a gun at me. 4 police officers surrounded at me and 2 guns were pointed at me. That was an experience I had. I still have trauma as a result of those incidents. In the past, I worked as a government official. I was a member of provincial parliament back in 1994. And then when Rodney King was beaten and there were protests, I supported the protests and the rallies. It was an ongoing issue. I was involved with the deaf community, with Black individuals, people of color, gay and lesbian individuals. In my role in government, I was supportive of all those communities. The system, in all honesty, was awful. The government has harmed people of color, Indigenous people, deaf people who sign, deaf people who use spoken language, hard of hearing people. There's been harm. And I'll be direct and honest with you. In the deaf community, in the interpreting community, we are still witness to racism, including within the interpreting community. It's awful. It's horrible. And I've seen it and I've been witness to it. And we need to have an open discussion. I see it happening and I see the blaming going back and forth within the community. And I get angry. I'm here to be supportive and to support others. I am white, I am, but I have a history of being in support and being an advocate, and it's not easy. People of color are frustrated. I've witnessed the fight. There's not enough deaf people, there's not enough Black people, there's not enough Indigenous people. The discrimination continues and the frustration continues, but it's important to have the discussion. The deaf community needs to have a discussion. There needs to be a dialogue. It needs to be an open dialogue and not focusing on the negativity. It's important to listen and be solution-based. I think we can be supportive of a discussion where it's solution-based. Black Lives Matter is a good thing that it happened because it's a strong movement. It's hit the world globally. Black Lives Matter is an important movement. It's an important lesson for everyone, not just people with disabilities. And when we talk about access, gay and lesbian people, people of color, we all need to be supportive and we all need to work together. We need to take time to self-reflect and be supportive of the movement and make sure you balance the frustration, yes, but we need to give something. We need to give support to a solution. All of your views, everyone's views important. The discussion is important. The communication is ongoing, but we have to stop pretending that we can just solve it. Stop the negativity. Open up, get together and collaborate. It's time for people, specifically the government, the community wants to work together for a solution. If we work together, if we collaborate, I'm sorry, Carmelle?
No, I didn't get that.
If we plant the seeds to a foundation, the water is the action, and we need to work together. I support all of your issues. We need to grow and with a fresh breath, make some changes. I applaud you, Liz, for being the moderator for this discussion and for bringing in these different perspectives. That's what I have to say.
Well, and that's just it. We need to be open and honest and authentic with each other and share our experience. It's very valuable. Everyone's experience is valuable. And it'll be better for everyone, and also the safety and health and safety for everyone. And everyone is valued, and it's important. You know, Black Lives Matter, that was such, you know, that thing with George Floyd and everything that happened, all the protests. We need to support and protect each other and our community. That is just so important. Wow, time, we have 6 minutes left, but this has been such a great discussion, and I really want to continue this, and maybe once it's done, we can discuss even more so within our community, within our deaf organizations, our deaf theater groups, and really work on this and have those discussions with each other. I wanted to ask Eva if there are any questions that came from the audience. I know we only have 5 minutes left. I don't know if we'll have time to answer any of it, but no, we're good. It says not yet. Okay, no questions from the community. I'm surprised that there are no one to ask questions. Oh, if you want, you can sign your question, and then we can make sure that your camera gets turned on if you're more comfortable signing your question. Advice on what we can help to learn more related to access? I'm not sure what you want to learn more about. Do you want to sign your question, Fanny? Access or for the deaf community? You know, hi. You know, we need to make sure that accessible for everyone.
Someone's
Fanny
just come up
isn't,
on the screen.
yeah,
We have someone on
Liz
the screen
didn't
right
see
now.
it. Oh, hi there. Hi, Fanny.
Hi. Did you want to speak your question? Okay. Carmelle, I'll do the answer.
My sign's not good. I actually,
Carmelle, I'll do it.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I have a question for Natasha. I just wanted to know when she explains Black American Sign, can she explain a little more about that?
Sure. Black American Sign Language, if you go on YouTube and actually type Black ASL, they have more of an explanation. You have a person there named Carolyn. I'm not sure if I have the spelling correct, but if you type in Black ASL and type in the name Carolyn, she teaches at Gallaudet. She developed a curriculum and developed some information and worked with
Elders.
an elder. Excuse me. She traveled around the American South, Louisiana, Alabama, and what ended up happening was in the American South, the schools for the deaf were actually segregated. So Black American deaf individuals actually developed signing separate from the white individuals because of the Jim Crow laws in the South. So if you look on YouTube, you'll get some more information and learn more about Black ASL. That's some of the unpacking.
Thank you, Natasha. Thank you.
You're welcome.
The next question. Eileen.
Yep, we can see you. Go ahead. Ask your question. Hi, my name is Eileen. I'm from Toronto. Ontario. It's nice to meet you all. So, speaking about unpacking, what would you tell the deaf community? Do you have any words for the deaf community?
Natasha, did you want to go?
Yes, I'll make it short. My answer to Eileen, I'm unpacking colonization, working towards being decolonized. Colonization, being colonized versus decolonized. After doing some unpacking, I have to say I'm pretty bitter. I feel better, I feel stronger, I feel more confident. It's given Indigenous Black people of color leaders who are fighting for systemic change, and it's open to the discussion. Those that are colonized aren't necessarily ready for a change. The white supremacy system is entrenched, and to decolonize takes a lot of work and a lot of fighting for that change.
Thank you for that. Thurga, did you have something to add? Yeah, it's really important that what Natasha said, but unpacking, thinking of my family moving here and growing up, and, I just thought nothing of it. This is how I grew up. I grew up in Toronto, went to the school for the deaf. I was mainstreamed. I had hearing and deaf friends. I thought I knew everything I needed to know. But that seems to be the case most of the time. And then I realized that, no, there are so many things that I am missing from my own background that I need to start thinking about and reflecting on and looking back as to, who I am. My identity, I feel that I haven't really, I don't really suit the identity that I always thought I was. And I always tried to accommodate myself to suit what others expected of me, and never really focusing on what I wanted or who I was. And so things have been changed around, and my thought process. But when I think of the stories that within the theater community, and that we need more deaf stories and more different perspectives out there to share. And so, we want your stories. We want to know where you're coming from and what your history is. And I want that opportunity to share that. But it's something that you have to reveal about yourself, and what I'm learning about myself. And, to understand how that impact is and what that story is, and really looking inwards, like it's something that you have to do on an ongoing basis. And it's just thinking, like, this is just who I am, but it's every day, like it's just something that I have been thinking about a lot since this whole COVID. I've had more time to think about it, but I think I do need a mental break. But I also feel that I'm conflicted, that I got to keep going. I have to survive, in the deaf community, please, just think about all these different situations, and we need to be there to support each other and listen. I want to listen. I want to hear about your stories and how I can support you. But Gary, did you want to add to that?
Yes. Now, remember, back in the 80s, do you remember Deaf Ontario Now? Back in the 90s, do you remember the rallies and the marches? People didn't have knowledge about ASL, about deaf culture, and people started to do some introspection, and then realized that many people don't know about autism, don't know about that form of discrimination against deaf people. Racism. People are sometimes subject to two forms of oppression. You might be subject to racism as well as autism. And so when you see Black Lives Matter isn't accessible to Black deaf people, that's deaf people having two challenges, a dual challenge. And it's important when we're talking about unpacking and the introspection. When you think about autism, when you think about racism, again, the deaf white community needs to do some introspection. They need to do some work. They need to do some work when thinking about racism. Jewish people need to do some introspection. There are deaf people who are Jewish who are experiencing racism as well. All of us need to take some time for some introspection. I think you need some time to reflect and unpack all of that, all of the issues.
Thank you. Eileen, did you have something to add?
Two answers. I think we have a number of people. I think we have a number of people who are on a tough journey. How can you uplift? Do we need to have workshops? Do we need to have more presentations? I think one discussion is maybe not enough. Maybe we need to have more targeted discussions. Maybe we need to set up some kind of ongoing series of talks to maybe uplift and develop the community. Because we need to think about our younger generation. We have to think about our children who are coming up behind us.
Right. And those workshops need to happen on an ongoing basis, not just once, but we need to keep going and doing this in our community for each other.
Two things. Medical information from doctors, information from dentists, from police officers, from teachers, workshops about people of color. All of these different topics we can actually focus on and have a series of discussions about within the community. The Ontario Cultural Society of the Deaf has partnered with another organization to host a webinar on October 17th and October 24th from 1 until 4. It's going to be about unpacking racism. There's going to be a deaf-blind presenter, again, October 17th and October 24th. We can send out that information.
Yeah, if you can share that, we can send it out to the community. Oh, you just sent it out.
Sarah from the Ontario Cultural Society of the Deaf has actually sent out that information about the workshops. It's Unpacking Racism. And the speaker themselves is a deaf-blind individual who is Black. They will be speaking to this topic.
And so there's like the three layers, deaf, blind, and Black. Wow, that's who's presenting the workshop. So, sorry, do you know the name of that person?
Oh, I'll have to find the name. I want to say, I will send out the information. I'll make sure to send out that information.
Yeah, Leah just typed it into the message, I think. Someone did. So October 17th and
17th and the 24th.
24th.
From
okay.
1 to 4 p.m. Please contact the Ontario Cultural Society for the Deaf. They will have all that information. Also, I do have some information. It's an initiative with it's ASLAO and the Ontario Association of Sign Language Interpreters, OSLI. They're in partnership with the Ontario Cultural Society of the Deaf for those two workshops on October 17th and the 24th.
Wow, thank you so much, everyone. I'm so sorry that our time is so limited. We seem to be getting into some really great discussions in terms of COVID and Black Lives Matter, and we've just run out of time. But I want to say thank you to all of our panelists for joining us today. This is such an important conversation, and this is important for our community and to keep these conversations going. So anyways, I just want to say thank you to our two interpreters, Carmelle and Marcia. Thank you so much. And thank you to Thurga, Mustafa, Gary, and Natasha Courage for joining us today. Thank you so much. And thank you, Liz.
Thank you to you, Liz. Thank you. You did such a great job. Eva, thank you so much. Thank you to both of you.
Shakespeare in the Ruff.
Awesome job.
Thank you so much for putting this on, and thank you for Autism Ontario as well for your support for making this happen. So hands waving to everyone. Be safe, have a good evening, and yay, hands waving. If everyone wants to put their camera on, we can all take a quick look at who's here. Oh my goodness. Thank you all for coming. I'm losing my people. Oh. Good night, everyone.